The forests of North America are dense, tall, and foreboding. As long as people have lived on the continent, there have been sightings of all manner of beasts and cryptids. Some, like the Canadian Wood Bison, were later discovered to be real. Others, like Bigfoot and the Thunderbird, walk a fine line between myth, fact, and mistaken identity. But there is one creature so elusive and so bizarre in its appearance that those who've witnessed it claim it can only come from the depths of hell. With stories dating back to well before America's founding, how can we possibly explain the Jersey Devil? Nestled at the intersection between New York and Pennsylvania, New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the US. Despite this, the southern part of this former colony is virtually devoid of civilization. Instead, it is dominated by a vast swampy woodland covering over 1 million acres, known rather ominously as the Pine Barrens. Yet, there is nothing barren about this massive timberland. In fact, it is teeming with life. To some, the area is a peaceful paradise, ideal for hiking, kayaking, and camping. Others find the woods almost primordial, an endless sea of trees and swamps untouched by time. The first people to settle here were the ancestors of the Lenape tribes, who arrived in the region over 10,000 years ago. In those days, giant sloths and mastodons would have roamed the area, alongside oversized predators like direwolves and cats with teeth as long as a man's forearm. Yet despite the presence of these fearsome animals, the ancient Lenape did not come to call the Pine Barrens the land of the mastodon or the land of the wolf. No, they instead called it the land of the dragon. To this day, Lenape descendants believe that these woods are home to spirits and creatures beyond human understanding, and though some base this on tribal mythology, the natives were far from the only ones to witness inexplicable entities here. In 1609, Henry Hudson's arrival in Delaware Bay marked the arrival of colonialism in North America, driving many local tribes westward. Though rich in resources, the Pine Barrens soon became known for something else: its isolation, its dangers, and the eerie sense that something was watching from the trees. Only the desperate remained: poor farmers, outlaws, and deserters, forming secretive, insular communities. Amongst them, whispers of witchcraft and devilry grew, passed down through generations. And it was into this shadowy world that the legend of the Jersey Devil was born. But these tales do not belong solely to the past. Even today, reports of eerie sightings, unnatural sounds, and grotesque animal mutilations persist. Some dismiss the account of Joseph Bonaparte, elder brother of Napoleon, who claims to have seen the creature whilst hunting in 1820. Then there is the report made by forest ranger Alan McFarlane in 1980, in which an entire farm's worth of pigs was discovered dead, each untouched except for a single precise bite to the back of the head, their brains mysteriously removed. Perhaps even more terrifying than the frequency of encounters is their consistency. Nearly every eyewitness describes the same nightmarish figure: a winged bipedal beast with cloven hooves, bat-like wings, and the elongated head of a horse or goat. Its body is gaunt and twisted, trailing a forked tail. But its most haunting features are its glowing eyes, often the first thing people see gazing at them from the darkness. Some never see the creature at all, only hearing the sound that has chilled countless souls to the bone, a high-pitched, unearthly scream. Some believe the Jersey Devil is the dragon of Lenape legend. Others trace its origins to 1735, when a woman named Deborah Leeds supposedly cursed her 13th child. Born monstrous, the newborn turned on those in the birthing room before escaping into the depths of the Pine Barrens, never to be seen again. At least, not in human form. Whether it's a prehistoric species or a cursed infant, the never-ending flow of sightings seems to support the idea that there is something sinister and deadly lurking in southern New Jersey. In cryptozoology, sightings are often judged by the credibility of the source. So when Ranger Alan McFarlane reported finding mutilated pigs with bizarre injuries, both Jersey Devil believers and skeptics took notice. But McFarlane was not alone. Other Pine Barrens rangers have had similar encounters, and some have seen far more than just remains. In 1993, Ranger John Irwin was patrolling the Mullica River, a 50-mile waterway in southern New Jersey. This river, historically used for transporting logs, had become infamous for strange livestock mutilations dating back to the mid-20th century. In 1966, a farmer reported over 40 animals killed in a single night, including ducks, geese, cats, and dogs. All of them were maimed in ways the farmer could neither explain nor recognize. Weeks later, authorities responded to the brutal killing of a 90-pound German shepherd found with its throat ripped out. Despite thorough investigations, no one could explain the source of the mutilations, only that the creature must have been extraordinarily strong. One evening in 1993, Irwin was driving his patrol vehicle down a remote road beside the river. As a seasoned forest ranger, he had come to know the diverse wildlife in the area well. Deer, raccoons, and possums were a common sight, and the vibrant ecosystem was one of his favorite aspects of the job. As he drove along, his eyes were drawn to a large shape emerging from the tree line and stepping into the road. At first, he assumed it was a male deer, but that assumption was soon put to bed when the creature rose up on its hind legs. Irwin's heart raced as he brought the vehicle to a stop just a few meters from the beast. He froze, wide-eyed, as a wave of terror washed over him. What he saw was anything but natural. The creature was over 6 feet tall, covered in matted black fur resembling that of a bear, not the short brown coat of a deer. As he examined the creature, he noticed that the antlers on its head were long and thin, and completely unlike those of a buck. If anything, they resembled devil horns. As Irwin sat in his car, helpless and petrified, the creature turned its head and stared directly at him. Time seemed to slow as they locked eyes, and though Irwin couldn't make out its facial features, he felt the unmistakable presence of a killer before him. After several tense minutes, the creature slowly turned and disappeared into the woods. In later interviews, Irwin admitted that he could not explain what he'd seen. He was, however, adamant about one thing. Whatever it was clearly a predator. The encounter left him with an unsettling certainty that something far more sinister lurked in the Pine Barrens. Something beyond human understanding, and certainly beyond explanation. When I think about businesses that have really made it, big brands like Mattel or Heinz or even Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty, it's worth noting that they all do a few things similarly. They've got really good marketing, and they've got a fully realised brand that works. But they have one more thing in common. It's the often overlooked secret of a business behind the business that is making selling and buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. The secret's out. Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Selena Gomez uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bedtime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/bedtime to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/bedtime. In the summer of 1973, Susan and her fiancé Dave decided to meet some friends in Manahawkin for a night of drinks and music in the woods. The group had a habit of finding a secluded clearing, parking their cars in a circle to form a makeshift picnic area, and using the car bonnets as tables and seating. Everyone tuned their radios to the same station to enjoy a mix of early disco, Motown, and rock, whilst drinking and dancing under the glow of the headlights, far away from prying eyes. By 11 p.m, several couples had gathered, and the group was already well into the evening. Susan hopped off the bonnet of their Ford LTD to grab Dave another beer. He was chatting with a few friends by a nearby car, so she reached inside to unlock the boot. As she grabbed the drinks, the radio cut to a commercial, leaving an eerie silence. In that brief moment, Susan heard rustling in the trees behind her. Growing up in New Jersey, she knew the woods had an ominous reputation. Not only were there venomous snakes, but larger animals like coyotes and black bears were known to wander near campgrounds if they smelled food. This commotion was clearly caused by something large and powerful. Concerned, she closed the boot and told Dave what she'd heard. Though initially skeptical, he agreed that something might be out there, especially with so much exposed food. They didn't want to risk a snake bite or an attack from a larger animal, so Dave ran to the cars, turning off the radios to get everyone's attention. Though the group grumbled, he insisted that they check out the disturbance just to be safe. As the music fell silent, they scanned the trees, but something immediately felt off. There were no crickets, no owls, no wind. The forest was eerily still. Suddenly, someone shouted from the opposite side of the clearing, pointing towards the trees. It became clear that the creature, whatever it was circling them. Every time someone spotted a vague outline, another person would then see it somewhere else. The group began to feel the tension rising, and Susan wondered why there were no growls or barks if it was coyotes or other wild dogs. Then, it happened. Standing next to their Ford, Susan saw a massive shape emerge into the clearing. The headlights illuminated the creature, a black, oddly shaped body about the size of a full-grown buck, but this was no deer. Its eyes glowed red like embers. Before anyone could react, it unfurled gigantic wings, so large that one powerful flap sent the beast soaring into the sky, causing plates of food and beer cans to fly off car bonnets. The creature was gone in an instant, and the group, terrified, scrambled into their vehicles and sped off to a well-lit area. Too intoxicated to drive home, they spent the night in a car park waiting for the morning light. The next day, when they had sobered up a little, each of them gave the same account: black wings, glowing eyes, and a powerful rush of air as the creature took flight. Mass sightings in cryptozoology are rare. Most people have a friend of a friend who claims to have seen Bigfoot or to have been abducted by aliens. But a dozen people all reporting the same creature with consistent details is something far more compelling. And this is the case with many Jersey Devil sightings. Even dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries, entire hunting parties have reported encounters with the creature. Though this account is the largest of such mass sightings, it is not the most terrifying. In the summer of 2003, a group of friends, all in their 20s, embarked on a camping trip to the Pine Barrens. Michael and his closest friends, Greg, Max and Frank, had just finished their college degrees and were seeking one final adventure before going their separate ways. Though none of the boys were experienced woodsmen, they decided the Pine Barrens would be perfect. It was remote enough to feel wild, but not so far from civilization that they'd be stranded if anything went wrong. Greg's cousin dropped them off at the edge of the forest, where they planned to spend 4 days and 3 nights hiking. For safety, each carried a hunting rifle, whilst Max and Frank also brought handguns. With their backpacks packed and a rough plan in place, the group ventured into the woods. After hours of walking, they found a clearing which was 50 feet across and set up camp. With daylight still remaining, they grabbed their rifles and headed into the woods to shoot at targets. But despite being far from the highway, they noticed a disturbing amount of litter. Plastic bottles, beer cans and bags seemed to be scattered all around. Whilst investigating the area, Frank spotted a plastic bag caught high up in the branches of a tree. When he climbed up to look inside, he found that it contained a mutilated raccoon. Its head was crushed and its chest was torn open, exposing its ribs. The group debated how the animal might have suffered such a fate, speculating that a predatory bird, possibly a hawk, had killed it and stored it there. Though unsettling, this discovery would turn out to be far from unique. After their shooting session, as they made their way back to the campsite, they discovered a dead possum, its chest also ripped open. It was then that the boys realized they had returned to the same tree where they had found the raccoon, but when they looked up into the branches, the bag was gone. Back at the camp, they had just settled down to eat dinner and talk amongst themselves when the tranquility of the evening was suddenly shattered by a blood-curdling scream, which echoed through the forest. It was high-pitched and agonizing, seeming to split the night air. Despite each of the boys feeling deeply unsettled by this, none of them could admit it to each other, so they continued their meal in silence. As the evening progressed, the group tried to shake off the lingering feeling of unease. They were sitting around the campfire talking when Frank stopped mid-sentence, his eyes locked on something just beyond the firelight. Michael followed his gaze and saw 2 glowing red eyes staring back at them from the darkness. Then there was a deep snort, followed by a guttural growl. Michael noticed that these eyes were the same level as him, despite the fact he was 6'4". In a panic, they grabbed their weapons and began shooting into the darkness, hoping to drive off whatever was out there. After several tense seconds, the forest fell ominously silent. As midnight rolled around, they took turns keeping watch whilst the others tried to sleep. At some point in the early hours, Greg heard something moving out in the trees, well beyond the range of the firelight, and realizing they weren't safe, the others decided to stay awake and resolved to leave at the break of dawn. In the morning, they found a series of large hoof prints around the edge of their camp, far too large to have been made by a deer. Still unnerved but relieved to see daylight, the group set off towards the highway, believing they would make it back by early afternoon. But as the day wore on, they noticed something strange. The woods seemed different. Landmarks they had noticed on the way in were gone or altered, and slowly but surely, the boys realized they were lost. They hadn't brought any survival gear aside from a few compasses, and knowing that the highway was south, they began to head in that direction. As they hiked, the group discovered more animal carcasses. First a deer, freshly killed. Its stomach was torn open and its eyes, legs and much of its entrails were missing. As they progressed, they found more mutilated animals. Rabbits, squirrels and birds, all in a similar state. At first, they convinced themselves it was the work of coyotes, but their assumptions were soon shattered when they found a grouping of these animals, all mutilated in the same way. As the sun began to set once more, the unease became unbearable, as they still hadn't found the highway. Several hours later, as the forest grew pitch dark around them, panic began to set in. They had stopped to take a breather when another high-pitched screech suddenly ripped through the night air. Then, they heard another strange commotion overhead. They quickly realized it was the sound of beating wings, only they were deep, loud and slow, as if produced by something huge. As the noise grew closer, the terrified group switched off their torches and dove for cover in the nearby foliage. They spent the next several minutes hiding, listening and waiting, but the woods around them were deathly quiet. After a time, they decided it was safe to continue and regrouped in the center of the clearing where they had been resting. In the perfect darkness, they had noticed a string of lights a few hundred meters away in the distance. It was the highway, and they all began to relax as they realized they were getting closer to home, and therefore, safety. But as Max once again switched on his torch and swung it to his left, the beam picked out something in the trees nearby. It was a gaunt creature, coated in black fur, standing about 6 to 7 feet tall, with horns protruding from its head. Its eyes suddenly glowed red, as if it had only just opened them. Then it took up a confrontational stance, unfurled its wings, and screamed in their direction, revealing a set of sharp yellow teeth. The group scattered in different directions, driven by pure panic. Michael ran towards what they had determined was the highway, the dim light of the street lamps just barely visible through the trees. The others followed close behind, and as they reached the road, they once again heard the unmistakable sound of huge beating wings. Then a pair of bright lights appeared from around a bend. It was a police car, which sped past them and then skidded to a stop just as it collided with something on the highway. As the two police officers exited their vehicle, whatever they had hit simply got up and ran off into the woods on all fours. The officers then turned their attention to the group of young men and spoke to them for nearly 30 minutes, telling them how lucky they were to have escaped a rabid buck of that size. When Michael tried to explain what they had really seen, one of the officers shot him a stern look, signaling for him to stay quiet. The implication was clear. Telling anyone about the creature was not advisable. In the end, the group left the woods with a terrifying story they could never fully share. and none of them would ever return to the Pine Barrens again. The Jersey Devil has long straddled the line between folklore and reality. For skeptics, the legend is nothing more than a mix of colonial superstition and misidentified wildlife. Tales of the creature, whether from Native American traditions or the infamous story of Mother Lee's cursed 13th child, are seen as cautionary myths designed to keep children from wandering into the dangerous Pine Barrens. However, the Mother Lee's story is rooted in some historical truth. Records confirm that a family by that name did live in the area, and some suggest the legend arose from social disdain, branding them as outcasts. Combined with the Pine Barrens' eerie reputation, the Jersey Devil became something of a convenient deterrent. Yet folklore alone doesn't explain the sheer volume of sightings. Hundreds claim to have seen a tall winged beast with glowing eyes and a terrifying screech. Biologists often point to the sandhill crane as a possible explanation. These birds, with their large wingspans and eerie cries, could certainly startle an unsuspecting traveller, but their height of just 4 to 5 feet and their lack of a horse-like head leave many unconvinced. Another theory involves the giant hammerhead bat, a species native to Africa with an unsettling, almost equine face. Some believe that during the era of transatlantic trade, a breeding population may have stowed away on ships and escaped into the dense New Jersey wilderness. However, no physical evidence supports this idea, and the largest known specimen had only a 3-foot wingspan and weighed less than half a kilogram, or 15 ounces, far smaller than eyewitness descriptions. Some cryptozoologists argue that the Jersey Devil is an undiscovered species, an anomaly unrecognized by science. But such a creature would defy all known biology. A flying animal with a horse-like head doesn't align with any species in the fossil record. For instance, if the creature does indeed have such features, it would almost certainly be a mammal, but the only mammals capable of true flight are bats. All other species, whether current or prehistoric, have only ever been able to glide. For more paranormal-minded theorists, the Pine Barrens themselves hold the key. Some Lenape tribes believe the region was a spiritual place where the veil between worlds thinned. Could the Jersey Devil be an interdimensional entity appearing and vanishing through unseen portals? This idea isn't unique. Similar theories have been proposed for Bigfoot and other elusive cryptids, which often seem to defy conventional understanding. Regardless of the explanations, the Jersey Devil remains one of America's most enduring mysteries. For some, it's simply a tall tale, a relic of old fears. For others, it's something far stranger, perhaps an undiscovered species or even a visitor from another realm. Regardless, the legend endures and the sightings continue. Whatever lurks in the forests of southern New Jersey, one thing is certain: those who have encountered it never forget. And if you ever find yourselves alone in the Pine Barrens after the sun has sunk below the horizon, listen closely. Because if the stories are true, the devil still lingers, watching and waiting in the shadows.